Welcome to Mardi Gras for the Mind. And for you out-of-towners, happy St. Patty's weekend. We never do anything in a day. Can we just acknowledge, first and foremost, for you New Orleanians who remember Bookfest's beginning, a little over a decade ago, it was a children's book fest, and it was on the grounds of the library. We sat outside. We've come a long way, baby, and that is Cheryl Landrew. Heart and soul is Cheryl Landrew. Who saw it through, and Walter and Kathy Isaacson, who have made us soar to new heights. And it's so nice to get press for something other than our cannabis-eating rat. So welcome to New Orleans. Cheryl asked me if I could introduce Liz. Cheryl knows I'm out of politics, following on the advice of my hero, Groucho Marx. I don't want to belong to a club that would have me. But she asked if I would introduce Liz, and I said, of course, I love Liz. We're like sisters. And she goes, can you do it briefly? The short answer is no. Okay, but luckily for y'all, Walter is going to walk you through this book that is, you might not know this about the Cheneys. They have authored between them almost 20 books, all of them bestsellers. One of my favorites besides Liz's, and it's an amazing book, is Mrs. Cheney's book on Madison, for which she discovered from our own Ursuline convent here, lost papers from Madison. So we have they are book people. And this book, since we are all readers, is so pitch perfect. The Cheneys all speak in complete paragraphs. You will find that same poetic prose, if you will, in the writing of this book, which is, Liz takes you from, gives you a front row seat to the iconic events of the last century and a behind the curtains, inside the room look at living history. If you've seen her hearing about it, and if you haven't, you've been under a rock, there's probably things you don't know about Liz before she became a household name and a political juggernaut. She's a lawyer, a constitutional scholar, a Mideast scholar. She served at the highest levels at the Department of State, USAID. She's been a foreign policy advisor to many presidents, domestic and abroad. She rose immediately to congressional leadership. She's a workhorse, not a show horse. But if you look at her biography, what does she say first? And this is the Liz Cheney I love. I love her like a sister, which caused her father, Dick, to say, no, oh Lord, no, that would make James Carville my son-in-law. So, but she is my sister. In the time she was doing all of those things, plus the things you know now, she had 5, count them, 5 children, one of whom is with her today. I don't know how she did it, but I'll tell you how she thinks of herself, and you can see this on her biography. I'm a proud rodeo mom. I am a proud soccer mom. I am a proud hockey mom. I'm a proud baseball mom, to which I say, how do you do it all? I just want to tell you a quick story of how she does it all, because she keeps focused. After 9/11, we were pressed together, often in undisclosed secure locations, and one of them with her children was at Camp David, and Liz organized a trick-or-treat for her young children then, much to the merriment of them. She keeps it real all the time, and to the amazement and gratitude of the military service who were aiding us in preparing for the war then. She's been through it all. She comes from grit. She comes from a place of perseverance, grit, self-sufficiency, and doing what is right. She comes from a state that always was right. They had the first female governor. They granted the vote to women first in the nation, long before anybody else. First female governor, first all-female town council called the petticoat government. And if she puts her mind to it and decides she wants to do it, Wyoming will send us our first female president. Walter Isaacson and Liz Cheney.
Well, you heard it here first, the nominating speech for the next president of the United States. At the panel before this one, Liz, everybody said, gosh, you remember that day, January 6th? And finally somebody said, let's not steal Liz's thunder, because in your wonderful book, Oath and Honor, that's a centerpiece moment. Walk us through that day, please.
Well, it's wonderful to be here and wonderful to be with my sister, Mary Madeline, and of course with the legendary Walter Isaacson and here at the book festival. Thank you all. And it's wonderful to be here to have the chance to talk about our democracy and the threat that we face. And that threat was made very real on January 6th. I was in the House chamber that day, and before the joint session began, my dad called me. I was in the cloakroom next to the House chamber working on my remarks for the debate we were going to have. And my dad called me and he said to me, "Are you listening to President Trump's remarks on the ellipse?" And I said I wasn't because I was working on my own speech. And he said, "Well, Donald Trump just said we need to get rid of the Liz Cheneys of the world." And my dad said to me, we need to talk about what that means. It means that he's put a target on you, that you're in physical danger. And we had a discussion about whether or not I should go ahead and give my remarks, explaining why it was not appropriate, not constitutional for Congress to be objecting to the electoral votes. And my dad and I both came to the same conclusion together on the phone that day, which was that I couldn't let that threat from Donald Trump stop me from doing my duty. But it was a stunning and a chilling moment, you know, to be having that conversation with my dad, you know, about the fact that there was this violent mob, and then of course the mob itself attacked the Capitol. And the main thing that I remember is being very angry as the mob was advancing and we were getting the reports that they were coming. I couldn't believe this was happening in the United States. I couldn't believe that, you know, this lie that Donald Trump had spread had you know, that we were facing a situation where there was a violent mob assaulting the Capitol. I knew immediately, as we were evacuated, that Donald Trump had to be impeached. And I knew it immediately because I believed that he was a clear and present danger. What he had done, and I did not know the full scope of what he had done, but even given what we knew, what he had done, I believed, you know, was a clear and present danger to the survival of the nation at that moment. I thought he needed to be impeached and immediately removed from office. And certainly we did impeach him. I think that the nation would be in a far better place today had the Senate convicted him.
Absolutely. I want you to try to explain then a little bit of the thought processes of your Senate colleagues, because Jonathan Martin just told the previous session about being on the elevator that day with Mitch McConnell,
Right.
and Mitch McConnell saying, it's all over for Trump, it's done.
Yeah.
One of our senators, Bill Cassidy, voted for impeachment as a Republican.
Yeah.
But I remember, I mean, Jeff Goldberg was talking to Rob Portman and then Mitch McConnell. It's like you could have ended this. Why didn't they? And what did you say when you talked to them about it?
Well, I was of the opinion that Leader McConnell was going to vote to convict. He and I had been speaking throughout this period. I think that when people look back on what happened, that decision, the decision that he made, both not to push to have the trial happen immediately and then, of course, to vote to acquit, that will prove to be one of the moments where we could have stopped this real existential threat we're facing. And, you know, my sense of it is that he was of the view, Senator McConnell was of the view that once the House had impeached Trump, that would be enough. that impeachment vote would be enough that Donald Trump would no longer be on the political scene, and that maybe the Senate would not have to go through the hard work of convicting. However, if you look at, of course, Senator McConnell's floor remarks the day that he voted to acquit, he's very clear about Trump's culpability. And if you look at the comments that many of the senators who did vote to acquit made, you know, they were not questioning whether Donald Trump was responsible. Many of them were saying, well, he's out of office already. It's not constitutional to convict somebody when they're out of office. And they use that as a rationalization. But I think it was a moment for the nation to realize that you know, our constitutional obligations have to mean something, particularly when they're difficult to fulfill. And now we're facing, you know, a similar situation in many ways, where, you know, we have a president of the United States who attempted to overturn an election, seize power, and our justice system has to be able, it has to be able to work to hold him accountable, to have a trial on the January 6th evidence before the next election. It's fundamentally important. And I think that in particular why this matters so much is because you know, Donald Trump, he knows what people have said when they've testified in front of the grand jury. He has all of that information. He knows, he's got all of the transcripts from the January 6th committee. He has them. He has all of the evidence. He knows that the people who will testify against him in open court in that January 6th trial are those closest to him. They are people who were the most senior members of his administration, people probably like the vice president's counsel, attorney general, the acting attorney general, the head of his campaign. All of the people closest to him will be testifying in open court about what he did, about his culpability, about what he was doing while the attack was happening. You know, he was not only sitting in the dining room next to the Oval Office, watching the attack on television. We know he was doing that because of the testimony of individuals inside the White House who were with him. We also know that while that attack was happening, and he was continuing to refuse to tell the mob to leave, we know that he knew the mob was armed when he sent them to the Capitol. And we also know that while the attack was happening, he was handed a note. And the note said on it that a civilian had been shot at the entrance to the chamber of the United States House of Representatives. And we know that when he was handed that note, he put it down on the table in front of him, and he continued to watch the attack on television. Now, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, that's depravity. And that person can never be near the White House, near the Oval Office again.
I think Mary introduced you by saying you're a great writer. And I was just struck at the opening of the book, which everybody must buy. It's been 16 weeks on the bestseller list, and we're due to keep you there. But the opening sentence is, "This is the story of the moment when American democracy began to unravel." And it's not just about Trump then.
Yeah.
It's about democracy. How?
Right. No, that's right. And I think it's such an important point because people often ask me how many Republican members of Congress actually believe Donald Trump's lies. And, you know, I think it's like 3.5. I mean, it's really, and and you can guess who the 0.5 is. But it's a small number. It's a small number. But there are far more of my former colleagues who know the danger. They know that Donald Trump is unfit for office. They know that what he did is indefensible. But they're enabling him, and they're collaborating. And we know from history We know from what's happened in other countries at other moments in history when autocrats, when people who have been aspiring to be tyrants, when they have been able to take over, they have to have people collaborate with them. They can't do it by themselves. And it can be difficult as Americans to face the reality that is a threat that we now have to defeat in our own country. But it's not only, it's certainly necessary to defeat Donald Trump. It is also necessary to defeat the politicians who are collaborating with him and enabling what he's doing.
I love that notion because Václav Havel, the great playwright who stood up in the Czechoslovakian Revolution, said you could divide people as to who in their heart were collaborators and who would speak truth to power. You took that path of speaking truth to power when so many others became collaborators. And I must admit that probably every one of us, maybe with the exception of you, know in our heart we sometimes worry about the tendency to go along and be a collaborationist. Talk to me about what it takes to fight the temptation to be a collaborationist. And you talk about Leader McConnell and everything he said in his speech and all. And this past week he endorsed Donald Trump.
Right, yeah.
What's happened?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say, you know, and I'm preaching to the choir here when I talk about how important it is for us to make sure we're teaching American history. Mm-hmm. But so much of what's going to be necessary to preserve the Republic is making sure that our young people understand the structure of our Constitution and understand how what we're asking of them in terms of defending it. And what I saw among many of my colleagues was, for a whole range of reasons. Sometimes it was because they were worried about their own political career. Sometimes it was because of a fear of violence. And I think that's a really important point for us to recognize. You know, Donald Trump today, as he's facing you know, these indictments on 91 counts, as he's, you know, been, and don't forget this, been adjudicated by a jury of his peers unanimously to have committed sexual assault. Don't forget that. That is not a man that any of us should be giving our political support to. And in each of these cases, in each of these cases, for example, with those juries, the judges have, in a couple of occasions with those juries, have required that the juries be anonymous. And that's because of the threat of violence and the threat of intimidation, which has never before in our history have we faced that kind of threat of violence that's being instigated by a president or a former president. And I think it certainly has had an impact, as well as just the tendency on the part of too many people to simply go along. But I would say, and I say to young people often, that it isn't a complicated thing. When you're faced with a decision or a choice and you are facing pressure to do something you know is wrong, all of us have a conscience. We all have that voice that we can hear that is telling us what is right. And ultimately, and nobody gets it right all of the time, but in this set of circumstances, it never seemed to me that there was a choice. It was very clear about what was required at each step of the way.
Let me push back a little bit on the notion that it's just about Trump. This nation has fractured, it's polarized, and your party, even without Trump, has moved to what had is sort of a MAGA-like populist party that rejects what your father was about, what Reagan was about, what many former Republicans. I want to almost ask, what did the rest of us miss? I mean, there's got to be something there that's making people upset. And we can't blame it on Trump or even blame it on them. What's happened in this country that's caused this fraying?
Well, I think there are a number of things, and I don't disagree with you. It's you know, it's not only about Trump. Defeating Trump is necessary, but not sufficient. And I do think it's really important for people to understand the power of his propaganda. He has tapped into a very real and legitimate feeling that a lot of people have, certainly, you know, people that I used to represent in Wyoming, that the government's not listening to them. And Donald Trump tapped into that, and you know, is a con man. And so he's told people, you can trust me, I will be your voice. And people believe him. It's a real tragedy. I think he's taken what is a noble patriotism that many people feel, and he's turned it into a weapon. And so I think that that it's important to recognize that there are legitimate concerns about the government not listening to people, not being responsive. You know, I think that the other thing that Donald Trump did was he brought out into the light feelings of bigotry and racism that had not been, that had been sort of relegated to the sidelines. I mean, if you think about Steve King, who was a congressman from Iowa, and in early 2019, Steve King made remarks that were white nationalist remarks. And as soon as it became public that he had done that, the Republican leadership in Congress, including myself, we removed him from his committees. We stripped him of his committee assignments. We stood and said, that's not an acceptable set of viewpoints. It doesn't reflect anything that we believe. And he was pulled off his committees. If you compare that to what happened after January 6th to what happens today, and the role today that you see people who hold those same views and some even more extreme bigoted views, many of those people have been elevated in the Republican Party inside the House of Representatives. And so I think there's no question but that we face a bigger set of challenges. I think that we also face, there's a level of toxicity and vitriol in our politics that both sides are responsible for. And I hope one of the lessons of this period, once we get through November of '24 and we begin to look at what do we need to do to either, you know, rebuild the Republican Party or build a new conservative party, but that we all commit ourselves to conducting politics differently.
Wait, that phrase, or building a new conservative party. I don't know, keep going. I think you know my question. How does one do that? Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether the current Republican Party can survive. I think, and I say that with real sadness. I mean, you know, I'm somebody who has grown up as a Republican and believes strongly in those conservative values. But I think if you look at the Republican Party today, it has embraced an anti-constitutionalism that, you know, every single day, you know, the hole seems to get deeper and deeper. So I don't know if we're going to be able to rebuild that party. Or
Wait, march me through what it would mean to say we're going to build a new party that's conservative.
Well, I mean, I think it will depend upon what happens in November. It will depend upon whether or not, you know, the Republicans are defeated in November. And I will say this, again, as someone who believes strongly in conservative principles, that defeat in November for the Republicans is not only a defeat of Donald Trump. I think if you fast forward to January 6th, 2025, when electoral votes will be counted, the Congress that will count those electoral votes will be the new Congress. the current vice president will preside, but it will be the new Congress. And we know that the Republican leadership in this Congress has said that they will not certify the vote, or they won't guarantee that they will certify the vote. The Speaker of the House won't say that Joe Biden was duly elected president. So I believe that we're in a situation where the future of the democracy depends upon making sure the Republicans are not in the majority in the House and in the Senate in 2025. And I say that as somebody who has significant disagreements with policies of many of my Democratic colleagues. But I think that we can survive bad policy. We can't survive leaders who are going to torch the Constitution.
Other than teach history, what could people do in the next 12 months to help democracy?
Well, we've got about 8 months now, a little bit less than 8 months. And look, it is incumbent on every single one of us, to understand that there's nobody else coming. We can't sit out this election cycle and think, you know what, I don't want to deal with politics. Politics is a mess. Somebody else is going to help and we'll fix this. It's going to require every one of us working for candidates that we know will defend the Constitution, running for office yourselves. You know, when you look at the caliber of the people that we elect and you think about the challenges that they're facing, you know, we can't expect to be able to deal with the most complicated national security challenges, for example, if we elect people who are really stupid. And unfortunately, it's the technical political term.
Yeah, right.
But it means that you guys have to run for office. We have to have, when you go in to vote, too often today, you don't have a good choice.
Wait, why does that sentence begin with you guys have to run for office?
Well, I mean, you too, Walter.
And you?
No, I mean, look, I'm certainly not ruling that out.
Which means what?
Which means that I'm not ruling out at some point being a candidate for office.
Walk me through that.
Maybe
All right, we will have a sign-up sheet for those who want to be the chair of the Cheney, Louisiana campaign. Walk me through that pathway.
Well, look, I actually don't think that it is about me. Certainly not for the next 8 months in terms of what the priority is. The priority for the next 8 months is defeating Donald Trump. Once we get through that, and look, I think there's no question that people are dissatisfied with both major party candidates. And I think that's why there have been so many people talking about a third party possibility. But in my view, you have to be able to say with absolute certainty that a third party candidacy isn't going to help Trump. And I don't certainly sitting here today, I can't say that. I think it's most important to keep focused on what's most important, and that's the issue for the next 8 months. But then after that, I think, you know, the country has got to get back to a place where we have leaders who are focused on the issues, leaders who are respectful and responsible and serious, and who, in my view, are willing to look beyond partisanship in terms of doing what's best for this country. And
Before
I
I
hope
get
we can get back to that.
Before I get back to these current 8 months, let me go along with you and talk about a more middle-term future. So whatever happens in November, how does one, including yourself being a part of it, as you've indicated you were open to, start a new party in America?
Well, again, I'm not sure that that will be required, but I think it may be required. And we'll have to see. I think a lot of it will depend upon November. It will depend upon whether and by how much of a margin the Republicans are defeated. It'll depend upon a recognition that the current party, not just at the leadership level, although certainly at the leadership level, but in many instances all up and down the party positions, from precinct committee men, precinct committee women. We need to get, if we're going to try to save this party, we need to get good people running for those offices. We need to basically go in and take the party over from those people who have abandoned what the conservative policy and
Take the
principles
party
are.
over or start a new one?
We'll do whatever it takes, Walter.
Ask it. I don't know. And you said a moment ago that the problem with a third party, a serious third party, there'll be a lot of third, fourth, fifth party candidates on the ballot, is it could help elect Trump. But we don't know that now. Is your mind still open to the possibility of a no labels or other third party this election if it could be convincing, and one could test it out, one could poll it, that it would either have a possibility or at least it would not help Trump?
My view of the situation is that the stakes are so high and the danger is so great that you can't just kind of take a flyer on it. You can't just say, well, you know, I hope this won't help Trump. You'd have to be able to demonstrate with real certainty that it won't. And I have not seen that level of certainty at this point.
But they could also say, as you get to September, all right, it's uncertain, we're pulling back.
Well, I think that you know, the question really is whether you can responsibly embark on that kind of an endeavor. And I'm not sold on the fact that you could.
Okay, and not sold, am I detecting that your mind would stay open for a few more months as to whether you would run? Well, you're not exactly being
look.
Sherman up here.
No, I mean,
General Sherman, yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm not making any announcements. I don't know if you caught that I wasn't making an announcement, but no. But look, I do think that time is getting very short. I fully understand the desperation that people feel about making sure that, you know, we don't elect Trump, and so I know that that's partly why No Labels has been working on the effort that they've been working on. But again, you know, I come back to sitting here today. I can't responsibly say that a third-party candidacy like that would not serve to do real damage by helping elect the person that we need to defeat. And so, again, I don't view this as an issue about me or whether I'm a candidate. I view this very much as you have to keep your eye on what do we need to do to save democracy for the next 8 months.
So what are you going to be doing in the next 8 months? Are you going to campaign for other candidates? Are you going to be out on the road? Are you going to be registering voters? You're going to what?
Yep, I'll be doing all of that. I have an organization called The Great Task, and we're going to be doing education, helping to make sure people understand what the country's been through, what Donald Trump did, the damage that he caused, the threat that he poses, understand the stakes in this election, working to register young people in particular. I've been fascinated by the extent to which young people, especially, I think partly because they're not wedded to parties like some of us who've been around for a while are, but making sure that young people aren't just engaged in, you know, working for causes they care about, but that they actually go vote. That'll be critically important. And I'm going to be working to help elect, you know, good, responsible candidates to the House and the Senate. You know, I think that, for example, there are a few issues that are more effective at uniting Democrats and Republicans today than the idea that, you know, Ted Cruz is a buffoon. And So I'm going to be, I'll be working hard to support alternatives.
So you'll be campaigning for the Democratic Senate candidate in Texas.
I'll be campaigning for a number of really good, responsible
And how many
candidates.
Republicans are you going to be able to find to say, you're part of our movement, we're going to be backing you, either in primaries or in general?
Yeah, I think it's really a fascinating thing if you look at the numbers coming out of these early primaries. If you look at how many Republican voters are clearly not going to support Donald Trump and have said that they're not willing to support him even though he's the nominee of the party. And I think that it's not just Republicans, obviously, but independents as well. So, you know, there's a lot of focus and attention that's being paid to sort of the most radical parts of the party on both sides. But I think that the Republicans have gotten more attention. And I think it's important for people to remember that that's not reflective of a general electorate. And it's also not reflective of the millions of Americans out there, the vast majority of Americans who want responsible elected officials and who want our kids to grow up and live in freedom, and who believe that this is a great country with a tremendous future, and that it's a good country. And I think that I certainly see, as I travel around the country, a real desire for being part of a movement that will help right this ship.
And yeah. And I love how you use the word movement because you've not personalized it. It's not and what surprises me about this movement is there should be a lot of Republicans who are old allies of yours that would make it a movement. Are you going to be able to get, and I'll just name a few names, I mean, Mitt Romney, any member of the Bush family, your father or mother if you need be, but are there other Republicans who are going to say, count me in, I'm willing to not be a collaborator, I'm willing to be part of a resistance movement from the Republican side?
Yeah, look, I think that, as I said, there are millions of people out there who believe in this. I think some of the people that you mentioned have certainly been very clear and forceful in their concern about where the party's going. And I also look forward very much to bringing new people into the party, because what we have to do is build a party for the future that's built around these principles and these ideals that matter so much. But it's not a backward-looking party. But it's actually truly a conservative party that's faithful to the Constitution.
You said a moment ago, unfortunately, that you don't want to make any announcements here. So I'm not going to ask you to make an announcement. But if your goal is we have to defeat Trump, at some point in the next 8 months, you're going to have to figure out whether you're willing to say, I'm voting for Joe Biden. How do you think through that process?
Well, I'm not endorsing today, but what I would say is that I could never have imagined, certainly before January 6th, that I would have campaigned for Democratic members of the House as I did. I could never have imagined that I would find myself in a situation where, the members of my own party were opposing and actively opposing an investigation into this assault on our Capitol, the worst assault on the Capitol since the War of 1812. I could never have imagined that I would be serving on a committee, appointed to the committee by Nancy Pelosi. And I'm sure she never would have imagined appointing me to a committee. So, but I'll tell you, you know, when she called me and asked me to be on the select committee, I happened to be with my dad. And I stepped into another room in the office we were in to take the call. And when I went back to where my dad was, he said, "What happened?" And I said, "The speaker asked me to be on the select committee." And he said, "What did you say?" And I said I'd be honored to. And my dad looked at me and he said, "I'm very proud of you." And I think that it tells you how serious this moment is. It tells you how grave this threat is. This isn't politics as usual. And so, you know, I'll do whatever I have to do in this election cycle to make sure that we get this right. And for certain, that means making sure that people have the information they need to understand why they shouldn't be voting for Donald Trump. And I'll make decisions about those other pieces as we go, but I'll make sure to come back and keep you posted and keep all of you posted.
You know, that's about as close to an announcement as you can make. I can't tell you how much we all admire you.
Well,
Thank you so much, Liz
Wonderful
Cheney.
to be with you. Thank you, Walter. Thank you.